how does an English department prepare kids for the world that they will inherit? And I think every single member of this department would say probably that the answer undeniably is story. That story is all, story has been all, and story will always be all. And in the 10th grade, we are in year one of a new initiative committed to the teaching of the global story. The idea being that we best position kids, best position our young people to inherit the world by exposing them to the stories of that world and exposing them to narratives beyond Atlanta, beyond North America, maybe even beyond the Western world. That we grow in sensitivity and understanding through deep and sustained engagement through the stories of cultures and communities that maybe at the outset are unfamiliar to us, but always seeking common ground, always seeking those things that, yes, distinguish us, but more importantly, bring us together and kind of develop a platform of global understanding. And our students are going to inherit a global marketplace of ideas, and it's through the literature that we believe the English department best engages in that conversation. We are teaching in the 10th grade a graphic novel entitled Persepolis that tells the story of a young teenage girl's experience during the 1979 Iranian Revolution. And it sets her amidst a series of family tensions, societal tensions, and really tells a sort of universal coming-of-age story amidst that world that might be quite unfamiliar to our kids. Whitman's great, Frost is great, Shakespeare is great, but they don't always equip us in the English classroom to begin class with the world news page of the New York Times in the same way that a story like Persepolis does. Our kids want to talk about the events that are unfolding in the Middle East. They want to talk about what's happening in Africa. And we need English curriculum that's going to position them to, yes, develop their literacy, but also engage those really important stories that are going to matter to them, to their children and their children's children, as we all seek to find solutions and common ground beyond our borders.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Tozer. I have found that the Learning for Life vision statement really has freed me up to be a more creative teacher. Its priority to, quote, develop studies to integrate rather than separate, create interdisciplinary courses and departmental structures to support them has liberated my teaching. Support from the Center for Teaching to explore creativity in my practice through the cohort, and the interest of colleagues in Love Hall to participate in that collaboration. There's several projects that have evolved out of this kind of freedom, and the B project is a big one. But the key thing is the support and the freedom, the encouragement to integrate and to collaborate with other teachers and to look at curriculum as a whole instead of separate disciplines. That's definitely something I picked up from the creativity cohort. It's definitely something that's played out truly satisfactory for me and my colleagues as we've really fed off of each other's energies as we've figured out how to combine subject matter and activities to make learning a lot deeper for our children. So the exciting thing too is that we get another chance at something. We can continue to have different iterations, fine-tune a project, not necessarily repeat it just to repeat it, but if it's still relevant, pursue that theme in a deeper way. Because of these experiences, I've been invited to join the design thinking team this year, and I'm now teaching that with Marlene Getzendanner, and I'm so excited about that because I'm going to get to learn on a continual basis from a colleague in the building. And what I see about students benefiting from this is they see the collaboration, they see the overlap or the integration of materials, and it really validates the idea that you allow children to collect their own information. They have so much more to bring to their understanding if they're gathering their information firsthand. I didn't really know what all that meant a few years ago. I knew that seemed natural and organic and authentic as far as providing experiences, but the professional development at Westminster has helped me put that into a structure and given me a vocabulary and given my colleagues a structure and a vocabulary, especially through project-based learning, that it's a language that allows us to all work together. That's really exciting to me because it keeps this very alive up here in Love Hall. And then the STEAM work that's grown out of all of this, out of the vision statement. Wow, I mean, where will this go? We have so many ways to investigate and to support each other in investigating. I just think this is a really awesome place to be.
A couple years ago, actually a few years ago, Westminster started integrating technology with a program that called for IS faculty members to help other teachers find programs, find tools to use in their classrooms. So for a couple of years there has been this trend where faculty came in the morning together to simply share ideas, or someone was designated to talk about, for example, Google Earth, how to use Google Earth in the classroom, or how to use Smart Notebook in the classroom, or how to use Smart Board in the classroom. It was very much centered on the tools, and that was fine. That sort of gave a stepping stone to something where what we have now, which is called iLab, or the Tech Palace. And in it, we basically are using some tools that teachers are using in the classroom, but we are also looking at how methodology applies to those tools. So that was a missing piece for a couple years there, but it seems that now with this idea that teachers talk to one of the IS people and express how they want to use technology in the classroom. They talk through the process, talk through the lesson, and then a specific tool is selected at that point. Mark Labouchere, Sam Goff, and myself, we worked last year on prototyping this sort of idea of a lab space. Sam in his room had a number of different technologies, all things from these note chairs to smart boards to different types of projectors, and we've learned some lessons from that experience that sort of translated into what we have right now in the iLab, which again features a wall talker, a smart board, a movie projector, a furniture that allows for classrooms to be changed easily into different groups. It takes away this idea of teacher-centered rooms to student-centered rooms, and it really allows for more collaboration. It allows for more meaningful instruction at school.
So one way in which assessment has changed dramatically in the language department over the last several years, it's been kind of a slow creep, but we now have a great deal of momentum in this one practice, is the conversion from a traditional grading model to performance-based assessment model. And the nuts and bolts of it are when a student submits a piece of speaking, some artifact of speaking. Once upon a time, I would essentially give it an arbitrary grade out of 100. And I'd write narrative comments down. And sometimes the narrative comments would be very detailed and actionable for the student. But sometimes I would just be writing down their errors, and they'd know, well, I need to correct those errors. Over the last several years, we've been transitioning to a performance-based model of assessment where the speaking assessment, and we have the same for writing, reading, and listening assessments, is built on a rubric, and the students have access to the rubric ahead of time. And it's there are 5 criteria to the rubric, things like vocabulary use, language use, mechanics, which refers to grammar, accent, fluidity. And it's a 4-point rubric, and each of the points on that rubric speak to a specific language behavior. That language behavior could be very favorable, like speaking in original language, creating your own language. And then there's the less favorable characteristic, like memorized chunking, creating, just delivering memorized chunks of language. And the change we've seen since we've gone this way is students are much more articulate in asking, how can I get better? So as opposed to, how can I get an A on the next one, they say, how can I improve my fluidity? Well, that's a question I can answer. I can't answer how they can get an A. So it helps teachers immeasurably, but the real difference is in what it does for the student. It gives the kids enough information to ask a really good question about how they can get better.
Leading institutions are able to recruit and retain top talent. And last spring in the English department, we had the opportunity to hire 5 new colleagues. And the strategic plan emerged as a really important piece of that recruitment process. Whenever you're sitting across a table at a job fair or on the phone with a prospective candidate, the challenge is always to be able to tell the story of your school and to be able to offer them specific steps that you have taken to actually live out that story in the hallways, on the athletic fields, and in the community. And I felt so equipped as we had those conversations last week to sort of answer the questions that all smart candidates have about what you're doing beyond sort of the language of the vision statement. That all sounds well and good, that all sounds nice, but how is that manifesting itself in your school? And I was able to talk about Jan term, our new schedule, the one-to-one relationship, all the work we're doing to promote the development of teachers and teams. And that capacity really excited the candidates, really inspired them to, I think, consider us in a way that maybe they wouldn't have or didn't consider other schools. And the capacity in a national search to really be able to get every one of your number 1 choices to agree to change their life to be here is extraordinarily inspiring for us. And since they've been here, we're now in day 3 or 4 of school, you can already see the impact that influx of new colleagues is having in our department, the conversations that they're inspiring. It's really forced all of us to raise our game and define what it is that we do. And all of that energy, I think, stems from the language and steps of the strategic plan and goes back to that capacity for us to recruit candidates with not only a nice sounding story, but some sort of bold initiatives that really, I think, separate us from the other options that top candidates have across the country.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Learning for Life and the school's vision, for me, not only gave me permission, but I feel like actively encouraged me to leave my classroom, make connections, not only on our campus, but outside of as well. As I think back to last year, one of the moments for me as a teacher that was truly a highlight was as I was teaching my students about the spinal cord, and we had spent time, and they're smart students, so they had learned well the basics of the spinal cord. They could tell me where white matter was, where gray matter was, motor, sensory, nerves, all of it. They'd taken a test on it and done beautifully. And I thought, well, I'm going to have them build a sculpture of a spinal cord, and that'll sort of be our capstone project for this unit. And in the new schedule, I have time to meet now, regular protected time, where I can meet with the STEAM initiative. That is consistently a highlight of my week. And so at a meeting, I presented to my colleagues what I thought I would do. And instantly, one of the art teachers, Lauren Sleet, said, "Let me come to your class. Let me do this with you." And she came, and she worked with my students on 3D form and material and presentation, and led them through thinking about this and how they wanted to represent a spinal cord. We put my students in small groups, and they were able to workshop what they were going to build and why and how. And what struck me about that, and at first honestly maybe felt a little bit devastating because I thought my students knew the spinal cord so well, and they did on one hand, but when they were asked to construct a spinal cord and to push themselves and to do something a little outside the box, they sort of went back to the beginning. They almost froze a little. Wait a minute, what do I know about the spinal cord? How do I show this? What am I doing? And so we had this real moment of murkiness and muddle in my classroom, and watching the students push through that and emerge from that and build their sculptural creations was so rewarding. And in the end, I had people offering to try to buy some of the creations the students had made. But that, for me, I don't know how to conclude that, Bob. Hang on.
Okay.
My name is Hartley Jeffries, and I teach Spanish in the middle school. And one of the greatest ways that the implications of the strategic plan has affected my teaching is in the idea of global connection and global awareness. And as a language teacher here in the middle school, since I teach Spanish, it's really important to me and to my colleagues that we not only have the opportunity to bring foreign cultures into our classrooms, but also that we have the chance to take our students out of the classrooms and experience them out on the streets. So a colleague of mine in the middle school and I organized the first ever middle school study abroad trip to Spain this summer. And in June, we took 15 7th and 8th graders to Valencia, Spain, where he was from, Zeke Hoyos is from, and where I studied abroad in college. So a city that we were both very familiar with. And we took 15 very eager 7th and 8th graders out there. And before we went, we had our students collaborate with their age students at a middle school in Valencia. So we Skyped weekly to monthly with the students that we were going to be working with while we were in Valencia. We had our students speak in Spanish, their students spoke to us in English, and talked about the activities that we would be doing and some of the cultural differences that our students would experience once they got to Spain. Once we got over there, we had all of our students attend classes every weekday morning from 8:30 until 11. So they went to a regular Spanish middle school, studied all of their classes in Spanish, interacted with their buddies there, and then after lunchtime we would take them out and do different cultural activities around Valencia. So anything from having cooking lessons and learning how to cook Spanish tapas and paella, to taking flamenco lessons, bike tours of the city, going to the zoo, and taking some other educational hikes and nature tours of the city. All of that was done with the aim of having our students really get to know and understand students their age that were from a different culture. And I think, as we all know, we sometimes live in a bubble here in Westminster, as much as we love to incorporate different aspects of culture into our language classes. But having the opportunity for our students to go there and really live it and be able to apply their Spanish in a real situation was phenomenal. We also had a second study abroad program in the middle school this year that was the first ever trip to South America with some of our science students in the middle school. They traveled to Ecuador, incorporated their Spanish and their science in a collaboration with Love It. So that was another incredible way that we've been working towards global collaboration in the middle school.
So I'm going to reflect a little bit about where we've been with technology and where we're headed. And I think the lower school has some really great initiatives that we have begun to implement. We used to have 2 computer labs, and they are now the design labs, which we're sitting right here in the design lab. So that means that the students no longer come to a separate place to use technology. The technology is in their classrooms. This year is the first year that we have our pre-first through second with one-to-one one-to-one iPads. And then in 3rd to 5th, we've had one-to-one laptops for at least 2 years, I think. So every student has a device to use to aid their learning, to help them to reach new heights with using technology and helping their learning with those kinds of things. So that means we've changed how we do instruction with technology in the lower school. And what we've tried to do, we see ourselves more as technology coaches, working more with the teachers than with the students. And so we have a great little room called the iLearn Lab, where teachers can come in one-on-one or in a small group, and they can come and get some personalized instruction from myself, or Shanice Fitchett is the other one of the other instructional specialists here. So that's been great, because the teachers in the classrooms have to take ownership now of what they teach the students with regards to whatever applications or things like that that they want the students to use. So I had to learn to let go and not expect every single student to get exactly the same experience in technology, and to trust that the teachers were going to learn what they needed to learn to be able to take the students where they wanted them to go with the iPads and the laptops. One of the things that Shanice and I did, we had a grant, and we worked on putting together some little videos, some training videos, and we use a screen capture, and we, I think we're just probably as good as anything you'd find on Microsoft or Google, that we have made these, and we've got some very good feedback from students and teachers that they can go back over and look at those videos again and again, so they can do it on their own time when they need to, right before they're going to use, say, iMovie or GarageBand or something like that. So I'm very excited about what we're doing down here with technology. I think the teachers are getting on board, and of course the students are just delighted to have their iPads and their laptops. So maybe you should get to talk to one of them.
My neuroscience class has a large requirement in the final project. And when I first present this to students, as good Westminster students would, they are picturing a 5 to 7 page, single-space typed paper with 1-inch margins. And through Learning for Life and in conversation with colleagues about how to implement that in our classroom, I have enjoyed kind of exploding that idea of a final project. Students are still welcome to write that paper if that's what they want, and if that resonates with the way they learn and the way they express their learning. However, I can report that of 80 some odd students who've taken the class, I believe I have only gotten 2 papers. Because instead, what I have made available to students is the chance to do anything they want. One student last year, for example, she's a musician, incredibly talented musician. And so in response to her intensive semester-long study of antisocial personality disorder, she composed a piece of music. And when she presented to the class, she walked us through the different movements in the music and how they reflected the diagnostic criteria, treatment, and lifelong consequences of that disease. Kind of gives me goosebumps to think back to that. I had another student who studied autism, and she had written a beautiful wiki page full of content and facts, but instead of presenting and simply reading content to the class, instead she worked through the Glenn Institute and found an opportunity for us to go spend a day on a farm in Canton, Georgia, at a school for children who live with autism. And so we boarded our bus, and mind you, smart students, capable students, well-educated students who knew the textbook definition of autism. They could have rattled it off. And yet I watched when we got to the farm, these students lose their footing for a minute and struggle a little bit to understand how to try to relate to and connect with these other children living with autism. Now, very quickly they found their footing, but the greatest joy for me was as we drove home, listening to my students process what that was. I knew people with autism maybe didn't make eye contact and might struggle in first meeting someone, but I found myself getting my feelings hurt when the student assigned to me didn't want to come over and play with me right away. And watching these students take something that they had learned in a textbook way, but then go have to live it and fully incorporate it, just brought me such incredible joy. And I hope for those students cemented their understanding of autism in a way that I never could have if I hadn't left Robinson Hall.